Hi, I'm Jed Babbin, and this is Afterwards. I'm the editor of Human Events and humanevents.com, and joining me to talk about the global warming crisis is my good friend Chris Horner, author of Red Hot Lies, How Global Warming Alarmists Use Threats, Fraud, and Deception to Keep You Misinformed. Chris, thanks for joining me.
Thank you, Jed.
We ought to note that your book is published by Regnery, a sister company of Human Events, and let's get right to it. I'm just sitting here reading something very dramatic. Just a couple of days ago, the following headline appeared, courtesy of the Associated Press. Obama left with little time to curb global warming. And I quote, since Clinton's inauguration, summer Arctic ice has lost the equivalent of Alaska, California, and Texas. The 10 hottest years on record have occurred since Clinton's second inauguration. Global warming is accelerating. Time is close to running out, and Obama knows it, end quote. We really are sunk, aren't we, Chris?
Again, yes, the sky is falling again, except if you look up, it's exactly where we left it.
All right, well, now let's talk about this. George Bush is reviled roundly around the world by all of the great elites for rejecting the Kyoto Global Warming Treaty and talking about how we really need to deal with this from an economic basis. Now, just how many degrees has the global temperature risen since George Bush took office?
Oh, it's cooled. As George Bush prepares to leave office, the planet is cooler than when he entered. This AP story...
How can that be?
Well, I saw Al Gore's movie, Correlation Equals Causation, so George Bush cooled the planet by saying mean things about Kyoto. Let's clear the air here. George Bush didn't reject Kyoto any more than Bill Clinton did. Bill Clinton signed the Kyoto Protocol, so these claims that George Bush is a mean man for refusing to sign something that Bill Clinton already signed is like being mad at him for refusing to sign the Treaty of Versailles and finally putting an end to the horrors of World War I. Someone beat him to it. He never unsigned it, which you can do. He did unsign the International Criminal Court, the Rome Statute, as you know.
Sure.
And you can find the letter. It's very short, very sweet, from John Bolton to Kofi Annan. Dear Kofi, not going to happen. That's all it takes. We never did that with Kyoto. We said mean things about it. It doesn't matter. The Senate could ratify it tomorrow. They don't need any more permission than that signature that was affixed by a gentleman named Peter Burley on November 12, 1998. The Senate doesn't want to vote on it, nor would they. They may try to find a way around the next Kyoto by calling it something other than a treaty, as the word on the street has it. But this Kyoto was not rejected. He just said bad things about it and didn't ask the Senate to vote on it, and they don't need that request.
Well, but horror of horrors. I mean, this trend is not what all of the alarmists seem to be saying. Now, we just saw a week or so ago in Europe another round of proposed treaties coming around, and the Europeans couldn't quite get themselves together on it. Now we have the French, I'm sorry, not French president, heaven knows, the Czech president Václav Klaus saying, I think he's called it a silly luxury. Now, he's a heretic like you. Why is he right?
Well, he's right on several levels. First, I'm going to shock you and say that environmental protection is a luxury good. You don't see poor nations engaging in it. And I know there are many individuals who work on anecdotes saying, no, 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 those who work closer to the land take care of it. Nonsense. Rich countries impose environmental regulations, and the better the economy is, then they will lard on more layers, and they will begin regulating in the parts per billion than the parts per trillion. True story. Go to Haiti and ask them about their Clean Air Act, and I've made my case. Wealthier is healthier, wealthier is cleaner. And we also know that if what they say, the premise behind this global warming treaty is real, then it's real. Nobody says Kyoto would change it. They say, well, it's the first of 30 treaties. Pause, wait for laughter. So the better thing to do is to create wealth and make Bangladesh more like Florida so that when they both get hit by the same grade storm, they deal with it more like Florida and less like Bangladesh.
Well, but let's go to the heart of the matter. I mean, we hear day after day after day all of these alarmist predictions, all of these things telling us that the data shows that there is the ice cap shrinking. Now, you and I both know Stephen Colbert. Stephen has an inordinate fear of bears. Now, the good news for Stephen Colbert is the ice caps are shrinking and the polar bears are dying off, right?
If human beings procreated as rapidly as polar bears have since the 1950s, there would be 11 billion of us. Now follow this new math.
That'd be a lot of bears. Stephen would be terrified.
He may be, because actually the country would look more like New Jersey, very, very crowded.
That scares me. I went to college in Hoboken.
We actually have procreated far more slowly than bears, yet somehow we are overpopulating. Bears are procreating far more rapidly than we are, and they're going extinct. Carry the one, it's the new math. That's global warming alarmism. Why? It's a charismatic megafauna. It's a wonderful poster child on a poster or from a great distance. Polar bears are thriving. 10 out of the 13 populations are stable or proliferating. 3 suffered, and they're in cooling areas of the Arctic. Polar bears are a symbol. This is about symbolism, like the Kyoto Protocol.
Right.
You hear about ice caps. Greenhouse warming says the ice caps, polar ice would melt, plural. It wouldn't say one of the poles would be warming. It's polar amplification. They both would be warming, and they're not. So you hear about the Arctic, not because it's closer to where we are, but because it's where there was a recession in the ice mass. Okay. Now, it seems to have been reversed. Let's talk about the Antarctic and know that it's cooling significantly, well, cooling appreciably and steadily, and the ice mass is growing appreciably and steadily. So you don't hear about it, with one exception. The Antarctic Peninsula sticking up toward the equator, South America, right, which happens to be near something called the Seal Nunatuks. A chain of heat venting volcanoes under the water have something to do, probably, with shelves breaking off and ice mass retreating.
Volcanoes expending heat, actually warming the ocean.
So you hear about the 2% where there's ice mass loss, not about the 98% where there's ice mass gain. And that's a very useful ploy of alarmism, is to focus on local anecdotes and extrapolate it out to a global circumstance, which unfortunately, or fortunately in this case, is not the case.
So good news for us, bad news for Stephen Colbert. The polar bears are not dying off, and the ice caps, maybe it's good news for penguins too. The Antarctic cap is growing, even though the Arctic cap may be shrinking a bit.
Right, and here's one thing. My first chapter is on how the media, let's just say, makes mistakes, to be charitable. When NBC
let's not
News,
be charitable, let's be direct.
When NBC News, I will be. When NBC News ran a package in early 2008 about the horrors of what's going on in the Antarctic, they showed footage, B-roll, of polar bears. The news story being, how did these bears get to the other side of the planet? They don't live there. And then when they did a story later on the Arctic, they showed footage of penguins. These are the individuals who are passing along the information, for lack of a better word, to the public. That's where folks get their information, from folks who really don't know about what they're speaking of.
Well, and I'm looking at, again, I go back to this AP headline that came out just a couple of days ago. I mean, this is hysteria. You know, AP used to be the gold standard. They used to be where people went to for fast and accurate reporting. Now, I've been covering AP myself for months and months and months, maybe, I guess almost 3 years now. And, you know, quite frankly, some of the people, I don't know who wrote this particular piece, but this guy, okay, but the point of the matter is there are people there who just make things up. So AP has gone the way of the rest of the media. Now, we're used to seeing, you know, Keith Olbermann and some of these guys go over the top on this stuff. But what is the basic media message here is not balance. I mean, they're repeating data that you know to be untrue.
Right. Well, actually, what AP and this reporter particularly have a penchant for doing is using language to indicate the opposite of what they're actually reporting. For example, the new trendy way to describe an annual mean temperature is to say 2008 was among the X hottest years ever. Warmest was if it was a while ago, hottest as if it's recently. Right. And that's like saying in 2008 the Dow Jones saw some of its highest levels ever. It sounds like I'm telling you the Dow Jones is going up, but in fact it's going down. We've been hearing this throughout the cooling trend that is underway now. We're in our 4th year. So we hear this is in the X hottest years, when in fact it's cooler than the year before. That's an inconvenient story.
Well, let me interrupt you there. You just said something there that is very important. I want the audience to understand. We're talking to Chris Horner, author of Red Hot Lies, and you just said that we're in a cooling trend, not a warming trend. I mean, what is the evidence of that? Where do you get it?
That's an excellent question, because we measure the atmosphere now because this is an atmospheric theory. We put up satellites going back to 1979 now in response to the panic over catastrophic man-made global cooling, looking for the cooling signal in the troposphere. We didn't find it. We then began looking for the warming signal because the cooling was 4 decades long, approximately. And it turned around in about 1979, and it warmed for 2 decades, and that ended in 1998. And then temperatures were stable for several and then dropped for about 4. And the alarmists are now saying, well, the climate models tell us, because polar bears are dying and warming is happening in computer models. In the real world, where you and I live, observations, the polar bears are doing fine. Only the ones who drown are generally animated ones in an Al Gore movie, and it's cooling. They're saying, well, the computer models now tell us it will cool for a couple more decades, and then, boy, the global warming will set in with a vengeance. If we're going to continue listening to, this is the language of a child, we've reached this stage now. If we're going to base trillion-dollar policy on computer models proven wrong, because, well, okay, they recognize now it's cooling and it'll cool for a few more decades and then pow, the warming will hit. The cooling is what you should be scared of.